Hey, little mama, don't you know moms make a difference? Moms matter. But you know that because we talk about that all the time, right? And you're a mom, so you know. But did you know that moms just don't make a difference in a home? Moms can make a difference in a community. Moms make the difference in countries. Moms can make a difference in destinies. And today we're going to be talking about women in history that have literally made a difference. And they're women that you may not have ever heard of. The feminist movement will have told us many women that they believe have made a difference in history. And the school systems with the history revisions have kind of left some really cool women out. And I want to tell you that today on Moms Like Us Do Things Like This, we're going to learn about some really cool moms you've never heard about before, and maybe some that you have. So stay tuned and let's get to it. Welcome to the Moms Like Us podcast, where moms just like you learn strategies, systems, and skills through expert interviews and real-life insight designed to take your marriage, mothering, and home to the expert level. Hi, I'm Mona Corwin, your mom mentor and host, author, international speaker, and the founder of the Moms Like Us Academy. I've been coaching moms for over 25 years, and I have some really good news for you. Motherhood isn't a natural talent. It's a skill, and you can learn it. You can crush it at motherhood instead of motherhood crushing you. So let's get to today's show. All right. I have a very special guest with me today. It is Kimberly Fletcher, and she is the chairman and the founder of Moms for America. Now, Kimberly is really special to me because when I met Kimberly a long, long time ago, she was having her very first Moms for America conference. And I just was drawn to it. I thought, this is it. This is what moms need to do. They need to come together as moms and be an influence for good in our country. And I have to tell you, she did the boldest thing I have ever seen. She rented out the entire Ralston Arena. Yeah, she rented the whole arena. I'm like, this woman has got big ideas and big plans. And you know what? They've all happened. Kimberly has not only been in charge of Moms for America, but she has been an influence in Congress and in the media and honestly in the Kavanaugh hearings. She was very instrumental in that. And her stick-to-itness, well, I'll let her tell you what keeps her going. But Kimberly is married to a retired military man, and they have lots of kids and even more grandkids, and they are a happy, happy family. And I can't wait for you to meet my friend, Kimberly Fletcher. So I'm going to bring her up out of the green room, and we are going to chat. Hi, Kimberly.
Hello, Mona. I love being here with you. This is a very cool day for me because I get to spend my day with the mentor mom, who I think is the best mentor mom in the whole entire country. Everybody should know how amazing you are.
Well, thanks. I'll mentor him, and then you give them something to fight for, something to bring them together so they can do it. Kimberly, why do you do what you do? We were
Why,
all
why do
talking
I
about
do
this.
this?
Why do you do this? Y'all, this is a ton of work. Kimberly, she just recently, I was at a Mar-a-Lago. I mean, can you imagine? Kimberly Fletcher got Mar-a-Lago for the Moms for America Legacy Awards. And Kimberly, you're so amazing that you do what you do. But
Well, I
what's the
do
reason
think
behind
big.
it?
I definitely do that. I have big dreams. But I guess the simple answer as to why I do this is for my children and my grandchildren. I have been blessed to live in the greatest country on earth. I am unabashedly proud of that. And I don't have a problem saying that was the greatest country on earth. And I hope people who live in other countries think that they're the best country. But there is a uniqueness to America. And the whole entire world looks to us for that uniqueness, for the freedom, for the civility, the humanity that has been lifted up in this country that in the venue that God chose to be the wellspring of liberty and freedom. And families created that. And the legacy carried on from those families who wanted their children to be able to be blessed with those freedoms. And as I was raising my children, I mean, I was always patriotic, I carried that on with them. We pledged the flag, we stood for the national anthem, we did the Fourth of July picnics and fireworks. So I was always patriotic. But on 9/11, my husband was stationed at the Pentagon, and through a series of literal God-given miracles, he came home safe that day. And that was the day where I realized the true price of freedom. And I was willing to pay the cost. I committed myself to do whatever it took to make sure that my children remained free. And it was the day that I went from being patriotic to being a patriot. And I've been on the front lines of freedom ever since. This is a long road for me. This isn't just a short stint where I'm fighting against something. I'm fighting for something that I believe in, and that's the game changer.
Yeah, I would say that when I went to the Moms for America first conference, it was called something different then. But when I went to that and I walked into the Ross Arena and I met you in person, after that weekend, I too went from being patriotic to being a patriot because I could see it was so doable. And in my mind, I'm like, this is doable because I know the tenacity of a woman. And it's not just the mama bear stuff, which I really like the mama bear stuff. And it wasn't just that y'all had purple, which I kind of like purple. It was just the truth that our nation really needed it. And I didn't realize how bad we were going to be needed. And the Lord was really growing this whole organization up because we're needed now. Like this is dire. This is desperate. Um, how have you seen the growth of, or the not the growth, the deterioration that has come so quickly in our country? What is your
It's
opinion
it's
about that?
it's very shocking, quite honestly. Um, I've known that the country was going in a bad way, and I saw it once my eyes were opened, and I started to do research. I mean, I spent from 2001 to 2004. I read everything I could get my hands on excuse me, on America's history and heritage. I wanted to know, what is the story of America? Who are these founding fathers? I should have learned in school and never did. I went to Constitution classes. I read the Declaration of Independence. I ran for school board. I attended city council meetings, and I felt like I was like in a different world. And I'm not saying it was a bad world, but it was a world of bliss. Happiness, yes. Sleepless
Isn't that
nights
bubble?
and,
It's the
dealing
bubble,
with
everybody.
toddlers and all of those things were true. But the world around me seemed to make sense
Uh-huh.
until it didn't. And then I wanted to know why. Why does it not make sense? Why did 9/11 happen? And then the more I started to learn, the more I realized we are in a big we're in big trouble because I could see where America was and what it was supposed to be, and then I could see where we were and where we were going. But I gotta tell you, it's like whiplash of how fast it's happened. I remember reading in 2008, I read this religious leader who was talking about, he was talking about the devil. And he's like, it's not a subject we like to talk about, but it's important to understand how the devil works so we know how to honor him and be able to recognize when he's tempting us and stand against it. And one of the things he said in this speech was, sermon, I guess, was in not very long down the road, in short time, we will see dramatic changes where the evil of the devil will be in your face and yet completely insidious and behind the scenes. And I'm like,
How does that
how
happen?
can you
You're
have
thinking, how did
both?
that happen?
How, how can it be in your face and yet undercover at the same time? And now I'm like, well, we're living it. We're living it. The stuff that you would never 5 years ago, somebody told you that they were promoting killing babies after they were born and mutilating children because they were decided they were a different gender. I mean, it's just to be on crazy. And when you look back at the agendists, people can call them whatever they want, leftists, communists, Marxists, which is they're be honest, I'm sorry, they're pawns of the devil. And they do not realize it. They do not realize that they're being used. Um, and most people are just deceived. But when you look and see the kinds of things that they're doing, it's everything to take us away from God, from family, and from freedom. God is a God of freedom. He created this venue, the United States of America, which he protected for centuries, to be the place that people would come and build that foundation of freedom that we have been blessed with.
Mhm.
The devil doesn't want that. He doesn't want people to be free. He wants to order people around. He doesn't want you to know that you're a part of a family. He wants you to be divided from people. He doesn't want you to know that you're a part of this great country. He doesn't want you to know that you're a child of God. Everything that gives us purpose and passion, that gives us direction in our lives, he is trying to destroy. And the good news is, God is bigger than all that. Bad news is, most people are lost.
Yeah,
They
amen.
don't know. They their families are a mess, so they can't hold on to that. They don't know, believe that there's a God, and so they can't hold on to that. They think that America is a horrible place, and they can't hold on to that. And they've taught these things in schools for the last 5 decades. And it's been a slow, incremental destruction that people have literally passed on like a legacy of destruction down to their generations since this Constitution was signed. And they're literally teaching our children in schools in Boston to hate their country, hate their neighbors, and hate themselves and completely disregard their parents. And now you have a country where the government is trying to replace, have already very effectively replaced the father in many homes. They're trying to replace the mother. Now they want to replace the whole entire family. They're going outside of parental rights and they are putting the government in between you and your child. And I am sorry, but the government will never care as much for your child as you do. And the government agencies, religious organizations, associations, all those community organizations are there to support you in raising your children,
Right.
not to replace you, not to restrict you, not to regulate you. And that is one of the reasons why in the last couple of years, Moms for America has become so powerful. So, yes, we have a lot of evil coming our way, and we're all looking at it going, am I the only crazy one? Am I the only one that realizes the emperor is naked and this is nuts? No, you're not. And that's what's the beautiful thing about this is 2020 was like everything that has been going on for the last 100 years. God shone this big beacon light
Yeah.
and said, there's the evil, because darkness can only thrive in darkness. Evil can only thrive in secrecy. And he just shined a big beacon light, and now we know. And now we have this counter, moms. And I'm telling you, if you read Isaiah 3, you will know how powerful you are.
Mm.
When the women of the country go bad, the whole country, there's nothing left in the country. When the women of the country rise up, that is what saves, heals the country.
Yeah. And we used to say that there was an attack on the family, and then we said that there's a dismantling of the family, and now we are in rubble. And we're
Yeah,
in rubble almost, I mean, all the statistics are telling us the truth.
yeah,
Marriages are falling apart. Kids are more depressed than ever. Women are depressed. Men are emasculated. No one's leading the home. The mothers aren't in the home. And the schools are, or whatever, is teaching them what they want them to know. And somehow we have bought into the lie that everyone else knows better but us. Like we're not as smart as we need to be.
you need an expert for everything. And,
Yeah.
so Sam Sorbo's on our advisory board. I just love her because
Yeah. That's
I met her actually at a homeschool conference in 2019, and it was they had she was teaching she gave two presentations, and one of them was beginning homeschool where you start. And she said, you already started. You had children. You taught them how to tie their shoes. You taught them how to put their clothes on. You taught them how you taught them all of these things. Why suddenly do you think you need an expert to teach your children? But that's what the world's telling us. They're also telling us that, you know, to be anything, to be successful, to be considered um, of value, you need to be outside the home. And this is something that the world has been working, feminists in great number have been working really hard to get rid of the whole idea of motherhood. And recently, you heard nationally they're trying to get rid of Mother's Day and Father's Day. Well, this is actually something that's been going on for about 30 years at the UN. And they tried to get rid of Mother's Day. They have tried to redefine motherhood. It was unpaid work. They've tried to do everything they can to get mothers to just leave their children. Why? Why is it that they do that?
right.
I'll tell you why. Because they know just how powerful our influence is.
Yeah. And some people
Hitler
are giving it
and
up.
Mao and Stalin, all these major despots of tyranny knew if you want to take a country, you start with the children. And
And the
every one of them
children
did
are
it. We
always
are
the
literally today,
problem.
they all did it. And if you know history, you realize, and when we do our Mama Bear training, the first 15 minutes is me talking about this and showing exactly how these despots did this. And we are literally living in Mao's China, Hitler's Germany, and Stalin's Russia. And most American people don't even realize how dangerous the footing that we are on. But mothers are starting to realize that we have to protect our young. And that's created this mighty movement. But this is something that has been an historical thing that mothers have done. And one of the things that they've stripped from us is our history as women in this country. And it's one of the things that we give back. I mean, one of my favorite. There's so many great stories. But one of my favorite ones is Hannah Hendy. So Hannah Hendy lived in New Hampshire, no, Vermont. She lived in Vermont, and it was during uh, the Revolutionary War early years, and the Indians, American Indians, were working with British to because they thought we'll go with the British because then the Americans will leave and we'll have the land. They put their hope in the wrong place. Anyway, but the British used them to fight battles in these communities. And what they would do is they had raiders. And so the Indians would come in and they would raid the communities, and they would rape, they would pillage, they would steal children, steal whatever they could, and that's how the British paid them. Take whatever spoils you get when you conquest. And this is something that the colonists had left. I mean, they've been dealing with this in Europe for decades, centuries of which king is going to come in or which noble is going to come in and wipe out the peasants. So it didn't sit well with them, and so they organized and they had this plan where someone was assigned in each community to warn the next community if the raiders came. So the raiders came to the town neighboring where Hannah and her family lived, and when the guy from the town came riding in, it was her husband who had to ride to the next town. And so he jumps on his horse, and as he's going, he looks at Hannah and he says, go straight to the neighbor's house and take the kids and don't stop until you get there. She had a little 5, 6-year-old boy and a baby girl. And she had only gotten halfway to the neighbor's house when the Indians came through, grabbed her 6-year-old son right out of her hands. And now Hannah could have just fallen to the ground in desperation and sobbed, um, like a lot of the mothers did. What do you do when that happens? Well, she didn't. She put her baby on her hip, hiked up her skirt, and she followed the trail. And she went through rivers and streams and woods and hiked for miles until she finally came upon the British camp. And she went up to the commander of the camp and said she wanted her son. And he said, they're not going to, kill the boys. They're just going to take them up to Canada, turn them into good little braves. And she said, no child, no young child could survive that kind of a trek. Have the British now turned to killing innocent children too? And so he softened and he's like, okay, fine, you can have your son. And so she looked over and she saw all these other boys, 5, 6 years old, sobbing and crying. She said, they just want their moms too. And she looked at him and she said, I want all of the boys. And she demanded their release. And he gave them to her. And those boys, crying and feared and sobbing, grabbed onto her skirts and she wrapped her arms around them and her little baby. And they hiked all those miles back to town until she was able to reunite those boys with their families. That was the courage of a woman. When you hear what the feminists or the world will tell you about the women during that time, they're like, oh, they were weak, they were downtrodden, they were slaves to the patriarchy. You know, remember that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding? And there's a part of the movie where the woman says, well, he may be the head of the house, but I am the neck, and I can turn that head any way I want. That's who we were. We're
Yeah.
not downtrodden. And when their husband signed that Declaration of Independence, there's no way on God's green earth that they would have signed that without sitting down with their wives and their children and making this decision together because they knew what it was going to mean. And many of those women demanded it. They demanded that they sign that declaration because they wanted freedom. They wanted a better world for their children. And it started back with the Pilgrims. And if you know the story of the Pilgrims, it was like 2022, was it? I think it was 2022, was the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims coming to America. And we didn't celebrate that enough. I wish we had, because it was just an incredible story. And if you ever seen the film Monumental, and if you haven't, we have it on our store, and I encourage you to get it. It's the true story of the Pilgrims. It's Kirk Cameron's Monumental in Search of America's Treasures, and it talks about what the Pilgrims went through. And the idea that they left for religious freedom, that's not why they left. They had religious freedom when they went to Holland. What they also had was a society of debauchery, and they wanted something better for their children. They wanted freedom of religion, but they also wanted a foundation where they could build that moral society that they believed was paramount to freedom. And so they took the church trek to America. And that first winter was very, very hard. And several of the pilgrims passed away that first winter from starvation, from cold. And most of those who died the first winter were women. And the reason why is because they gave their last morsels of food to their children. They laid on them at night to keep them warm. And then they died of cold. Why did they do that? Because they saw in their children a future that they believed in, they hoped for, and they knew that their children could carry on if they laid the foundation. And they did.
Kimberly.
We changed the nation. Others are very influential in the home and in our communities, but we also shape history. And so another one of my favorites is Lydia Darrell.
Oh, you're not going to do
Lydia
Abigail?
Darrell was a mom and a
I love
homemaker,
Abigail.
and
You have
she
to do Abigail, ladies.
oh, I'll do Abigail definitely.
That's my
But so
favorite.
Lydia Darrell was a mom, and her home had been given up to the British soldiers. That was, quartering was one of those things that you had to do. I'm coming to take over your home now, and you're going to feed me every day and give me your horses. That's in the Declaration of Independence, that was an indictment against the king, and it's in the Constitution that you can't do it. So they worked really hard to make sure things like that didn't happen again. And one of the reasons is because the women were like,
We want this in there.
so
I love
So
it.
Lydia Dara was housing one of the generals, and he had a meeting when he told her, "I have there's going to be a meeting tonight. I need you to have the house needs to be quiet. Everybody, we need to be left alone, and we'll be meeting in this room." And she got a little suspicious, and so after everybody was quiet and the kids were in bed, she tiptoed up and listened in the keyhole and heard the plans
Of course
of
you did.
this general to do a raid on the surprise raid on General Washington's army. And they were stationed, they were camped just about 30 miles out. So then she snuck back into her room, and the next day she asked for permission. This is the part of the story that like drives me crazy. She asked for permission for the general to go to the mill to grind flour. This is the reason we have the Constitution of the United States. The Declaration said we're not going to do this, and the Constitution said this is the government doesn't have the authority to do it. Very powerful documents. Anyway, so Lydia Dare got permission, and she went to the walked the miles, a couple miles to the mill, and then she walked an additional like 15 miles to as close as she could get to the colonial camp until she could find someone who warned them about the intended raid. And so then she comes back and she, has her flour ground and makes the bread. And so then they get all ready to go do the raid, and the general comes back just flipping mad. And he goes to Lydia. He says, "Was everybody in bed? Was there anyone that was walking through the house?" And she's like, "No, everybody was sound asleep. You locked the doors." She had an extra key to get out. And he was so mad because when they got there, to surprise General Washington's army and defeat them, which would have been an annihilation of the camp, they were all gone. And Lydia saved the colonial army. And this isn't the
And
first time.
our President
There was a
Washington.
woman. Oh, I can't remember her name now. It drives me crazy. But she was the wife of a British loyalist, and he was off doing something. I remember he's very respected, and so she was respected. And British commander and his army, they were coming across the boats and they were landing, and she's like, "Well, even and I would love to have lunch. Come and enjoy lunch with us." So they came, and they had she presented them with lunch, and she was a perfect hostess. And while all this was going on, completely unbeknownst to them, she had one of the girls, the servants who were working in her home, go up and watch out of the top window to see when the colonial army and revolutionary from the colonists, their colonial army was passing through, in safe distance from this British army that was going to go after them. And she hadn't come down yet and hadn't come down yet. So she's serving them wine. She's like, "What about apple pie?" And she gets there. And then the servant comes down and says, "It's okay, it's safe." And she goes, "Well, it was wonderful hosting you. I mean, feel free to come again." And then they go out there and they're like, "What the heck?
They're gone.
We lost to the American army." It's just like, I mean, it was just, things like that. And then Penelope Barker. People don't know Penelope Barker, but you've heard of the Tea Party and how the guys, dressed up in costumes and threw the tea overboard. Well, around the time that happened, Penelope Barker decided, you know what, we're going to make this much more open. So she lived in South Carolina, in Edenton, South Carolina, North Carolina, Edenton, North Carolina, I think it was one of the two. Anyway, she invited over 50 women to come into her home, and then she presented this plan, and then she called it the Un-Tea Tea Party because they did not have British tea. She made herbal tea from what they had in plants right there in America. And she told all the women, she's like, men wore costumes and they threw the tea in the ocean. But you know what, ladies? We have more power and we can do it openly. We're going to have an Un-Tea Tea Party. And I'm asking you, we have the power to turn this around with the power of our purse. I want everyone to sign this document, commits to not buying British goods. Every single one of the women signed it. It went all through the colonies, and it made it all the way to the newspapers in England, where the newspapers were like, "Is there a female Congress in America too?" And and those women almost completely crushed the British economy in America. They would only support those businesses that supported the colonial fight for freedom, the revolutionary. And there were only 3% of us. That's another thing. There are only 3% of us. And okay, Sarah Franklin Bond, Ben Franklin's daughter. His wife had passed away, and so she became the hostess. And she was the one who greeted people when all these famous men, Washington, Jefferson would come into their home. And during the time of the revolution, they were concerned. She had a group of women who got together and did, different things, sewing bees and, whatever. And they started the society where they wanted to support the men and the war effort. And so she went to General Washington and she said, we've collected, they did this collection. They collected over $200. And she said, "We've collected this money. We want to give it to you for your soldiers." And he said, well, the soldiers are having they're in a lot of difficult circumstances, and I am, I fear that if we gave them money, they would just use it to buy alcohol to ease their pain. And he said, what we really need, Madam Goff, is shirts and socks. And so she said, okay. And so she went and got these women together, and they used the money to buy the fabric, and they all came together and they had a competition of how many shirts that they would be able to put together. And the woman who won, I think she sewed over 200 shirts, and they were able to present hundreds of shirts to George Washington and the army at a time when they didn't have any money for any kind of uniforms or just basic supplies. And I mean, it was stories like that where you being who you are, you literally change the world by doing these small and simple things that you think don't matter, but they really do. And then, of course, there's Abigail Adams, who raised a patriot. She had four
There's
children. She
more
was
than one patriot.
separated from her husband for a good portion of their early years because he was serving as the ambassador to France and ambassador to England. He was everywhere, and she was at home holding the home front, and through very dire circumstances. I mean, everybody knew who her husband was. The British knew who her husband was, and they didn't just go after the men. When they signed that Declaration of Independence to put their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the line, it's the whole entire family. And that's why they would not have signed it without that wife going, yeah, put your pen down there and you sign that thing, because it hurt them all. And Abigail, her son, John Quincy, who also became a future president, said of his mom, she would read the Ode to Collins of us every night. And then at the same time, she would read the Lord's Prayer. And the Quakers, which she was, were very detestation of war. I mean, they did war. It's all peace, 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 peace. No war, no fighting. And he said, but she would read the Ode to Collins right with the Lord's Prayer. And he said, I remember walking into the kitchen one day and seeing my mother melt her pewter spoons into bullets for the army. And is it any wonder that a boy of such a young age would become a patriot? And it was the influence that she had in her community. And then there's one, I want to tell this one. I'm going to read it because I don't want to mess it up. It's such a powerful, powerful, powerful story. Um, there's two actually, really good. Oh,
There
I
were
want to
more
bring in
than a
Eliza
few
Adams
women.
because
There were more than a few women that
there were
really
so
did.
many of them. Sarah
Yeah.
Clark. Okay, Sarah Clark was the wife of Abraham Clark, who was also known as the poor man's lawyer because of his habit of service without pay. Though he started out as a poor farmer, his reading and study made him prominent, and he was elected to Congress and signed the Declaration of Independence with the New Jersey delegation. All the signers of the Declaration of Independence, of course, were threatened and hunted by the British, but Sarah and Abraham paid an especially cruel price for their commitment to freedom.
Mm.
The British captured two of their sons who were serving under Washington, 25-year-old Thomas and their young teenage son, Isaac. British threw the young men into a prison ship in the harbor. They then informed Abraham Clark that his sons would not be given food until he publicly recanted his signature on the Declaration of Independence. Abraham gladly offered his life, his freedom, and all his possessions, but they were not accepted. British demanded that he recant his allegiance and support for independence, or his sons would slowly starve. Abraham and Sarah determined that they could give up their lives and their fortune, but they simply could not give away their sacred honor, even to save the lives of their dear sons. Abraham never signed the recantation, and I can just envision Sarah Clark sitting in complete despair, utterly torn over the circumstances that lay before her, and Abraham by her side, equally distraught, comforting her. We just have no idea the sacrifices that these women made.
Yeah.
When the word came to Congress of the mistreatment of the Clark boys, they sent a notice to the British fleet stating that if the mistreatment of American prisoners continued, British captives would start being treated in the same manner. British treatment of prisoners improved after that, and Sarah's sons were eventually released alive and well. The stories of these women, I mean, it's just remarkable. Rebecca Sherman was another one, and um, there was a descendant of Rebecca who said, "We always have been a patriotic race, and the marriage of Aunt Rebecca and with to her husband was a more active touch that created a power within their family that with the signing of the Declaration of Independence." And she said, you can just fancy the excitement and enthusiasm of the wife of Roger Sherman, the man who had much to do with this momentous occasion, because she was a born patriot in and of herself. And a lot of these women encouraged their husbands to stand up and fight for these things. There was another woman who, her name's escaping me, and I apologize, but she was being they were attacking her home. They were bombing her home, and the servant said, "Madam, we need to leave." And a bomb had hit. One of those cannonballs had hit right beside her. And she said, we have to leave." And she said, "I'm staying right here. The chances of a cannonball hitting in the same place twice is very unlikely." This was the strength of these women.
Yeah.
Revolution was fought not just by men, it was fought by the women who stood and supported them and held the home front while they were out fighting, and sometimes went and fought with them. And it's the power that we have by the influences that we are, simply by sewing shirts, holding a baby shower, sending letters to those who are serving across the sea to protect our freedom, standing up at school board meetings, inviting people into our home to have a cottage meeting, sharing the story of America. What those women did, the legacy that they left, is something that should be celebrated and honored and carried on. And it is who we are as women. It is the best of who we are, and we have the ability to literally turn this all around in one generation simply by being who we are and being the light in the darkness as we've always been.
Yeah. Oh, Kimberly, I love those stories. I'm so glad my mom's got to hear the stories. You are so sweet. Thank you so much for telling it. I sure hope you enjoyed this episode of Moms Like Us Do Things Like This. Sweetheart, we have so much more over on the website Moms Like Us, and we also are on Instagram at Moms Like Us __, and you can just join us over there to learn why we should know what we should know, what we should know. But I have got a little special thing that we have in the Moms Like Us world. It's called the Moms Like Us Academy, and I hope you'll consider it. You can find out more about it on the momslikeus.org website, but it is full of masterclasses that teach you how. Because, girl, motherhood isn't a natural talent. It's a skill, and you can learn it. But to learn it, you have to know how. And that's where we do it. That's where moms just like us, moms just like you, we make it happen. So I hope that you will go over and join us in the Moms Like Us Academy. Okay, that's it. Bye for now.